We're live, guys. Welcome back for another NFL live stream, this time for our Week 13 DFS picks. We've got quite a few injuries to get through, lots of value, lots of studs that we can fit into our lineups. So let's hop right into it. First off with the injury report, Kyler Murray, he's questionable, but expected to be good to go today. If he's not able to go, Colt McCoy will be the starter. We should get word on that over the next 10, maybe 20 minutes here. Same thing with DeAndre Hopkins, also dealing with a questionable game time decision type of tag. Andy Dalton will be starting for the Bears. He will be replacing Justin Fields. A few other injuries to touch on. DeAndre Swift was rolled out earlier in the week. Jamal Williams will be starting for him and will be excellent value, which we'll get to a little bit later. Brandon Cooks is questionable for the Texans. A few other wide receivers over there as well. Other injuries, on the Vikings, we have Dalvin Cook out. That means that Alexander Mattison will be starting for the Vikings. He's definitely going to be chalk on that team. We'll touch on him just a little bit later. Corey Davis is returning from injury for the Jets. And finally, probably the most important one, Jalen Hurts has been downgraded from doubtful to out. So now Garner Minshew will be starting at quarterback for the Eagles. In terms of the 4 o'clock stuff, it's a little bit too early for us to know about it. We do have Darrell Henderson Jr. is highly questionable. So a lot of people are on Sony Michel right now. But unfortunately, we don't know whether he's going to play. So could be a little bit of a trap situation there. If Henderson Jr. ends up playing, a lot of the field could end up being stuck with Michel. Odell Beckham Jr. is questionable, but should be suiting up for the Rams. A few other injuries in the late window. Not really anything that's massive, maybe outside of Darren Waller, who's already been rolled out with a knee injury. Foster Moreau will be taking his place. It is also chalk. So we have quite a bit of value on this slate, but also a ton of chalk to speak about. As of right now, Moreau projected for right around 30% ownership. So that's going to be a huge talking point. I'm going to be on the fade side of that. And lastly, the last injury we want to talk about before we hop into the projections, Deebo Samuel, who is out for the 49ers. That is going to funnel a lot of usage George Kittle's way. I expect them to use some of the running backs a little bit more in the passing game. So that should be an interesting one to break down a little bit later. But let's hop into the quarterbacks right off the bat. We have a lot of guys to get through for today. You can see that we already have Jalen Hurts out, projected for 0 points, everything like that, and all of the guys as backups also in the pool. With that being said, at the top of the board, Lamar Jackson is somebody that I will be going to. The Steelers defense has been atrocious to this point of the year. And even as a Steeler fan, somebody that wants to root for them. In DFS, Jackson's definitely a very strong option. Matthew Stafford is also somebody I'm going to. I like Cooper Kupp. That should be pretty obvious. But people like Tyler Higbee, Van Jefferson Jr., or even Odell Beckham Jr. are intriguing options as well. Definitely in my player pool. Justin Herbert, this game against this Bengals-Chargers game, I expect it to be an absolute shootout. You would expect it to come in with a ton of ownership. Everybody would be talking about them, that kind of thing. And while they've definitely gotten some steam, they're coming in with much lower ownership than they should be, right around 6-7% respectively between Herbert and Burrow. So I'm going to have plenty of them. And this is the one game where if I'm taking a stack on either side, I am 100% running it back. So I'm usually using 3 Chargers in a lineup in 1 Bengal, and vice versa there. And that's how I'm attacking that game. I love some of the stud options there, some of the value plays as well, like Uzoma, tight end, or even a Jared Cook, and obviously some of the stud options as well. Tom Brady, somebody who I just ran a set of lineups, 5 minutes before we got on here, was ironing everything out with my groups, and I was getting a ton of Tom Brady. So he may end up being in my pool. I'm going to go ahead and update this after we get off the live stream here. Obviously for some of the inactives and actives that we end up getting, but also for Tom Brady, even at that type of ownership, I do expect to get to him. It's a very good spot here in terms of over/under, pass defense. Pretty much everything points his way this week. So I probably am going to be playing some Tom Brady here. It's just a matter of how much, whether we're getting leverage on him or just trying to match the field. Let's go talk about some of these mid-tier quarterbacks. We already touched on Joe Burrow there. Jimmy Garoppolo made my core plays earlier in the week. Without Deebo Samuel, I think a lot of people are going to shy off using him. But at the same time, you have some good stackable options in George Kittle. You can go to Jawan Johnson, or even one of the running backs like an Elijah Mitchell that's going to get a ton of usage. So I like going to him there. He's a little bit of a sneaky stacking option. Also gives you a little bit of salary savings. Same thing with Matt Ryan. I talked about him in the core plays video as well. He's obviously on the other side of that Tampa Bay game. This could be a shootout. I mean, both defenses against the pass are pretty atrocious. You also have two relatively efficient passing offenses, particularly on the Falcon side of things. It's a really nice, cheap, good point per dollar type of stack. You can use Zacchaeus there. You can use Russell Gage. You can go to a Kyle Pitts and spend up its studs for pretty much all the other positions. So with so much chalk in terms of value on this slate, it is something I'm considering a little bit more, going to some of these value options, just because they'll make you unique right off the bat, right? A lot of people are investing in the Sony Michels of the world, the Jamal Williams, even people like a Josh Reynolds, a Devontae Parker, Foster Moreau. There's so many value options on this slate, particularly chalk options, that maybe just mixing it up at quarterback, taking a cheaper stack is the way to go. We can still get those top end stud options that people are trying to squeeze in, while at the same time avoiding some of that chalk. So I think that's an interesting way to take on this slate. Garner Minshew, a lot of people are interested in playing him. He's coming in with ownership, so it's not like he's being completely overlooked. And quite frankly, I'm not sure how effective he's going to be. We have no data on it. We haven't seen him play in quite some time. And the last time we saw him play, it wasn't too efficient, right? He ended up getting benched. That's why he's on this team now. I'm going to use a wait and see approach. If he looks good, he comes in as a good value play next week, we'll go to him, but I don't see a reason to try and be early here. Let's move on to running back now. And this is where we have quite a bit of the value on the slate. So we'll make sure to touch on pretty much everyone in terms of the value here. 1 second. Here we are. Fantastic. All right. So here are our running back projections. Let me scroll up to the top here so we can see it. Jonathan Taylor is an absolute slam dunk play. I talked about him during the core picks video. A matchup against the Texans is ideal. It should be a very good game script for him. Definitely somebody that I'm running it back with. He's one of the highest points per dollar plays in the entire slate. And he's up here in this elite tier range, right? Typically we see guys, right around 3x value here in the mid tier. He's at the top of the board and nearly getting up there. So you like to see that. Again, the matchup's ideal. He should be getting plenty of carries in this type of game script, and I'm going to be all over him. Some other people I really like here, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, both strong options, particularly Najee Harris coming in at really low ownership. As of right now, at 6%. I'd be surprised if he doesn't even come in lower. Just somebody who people don't love targeting this Ravens defense, and I get it. I mean, they are one of the best units in the entire NFL. But at the same time, this is a divisional matchup. These games are always close. Najee Harris should get plenty of usage in a close game. So I like going to him there. It gives you plenty of PPR upside, plenty of rushing upside, obviously. I mean, it's Najee Harris. I like going to him a whole lot there. Leonard Fournette is also somebody I'm well over the field on. Last week had the massive performance. People aren't going to him for some reason. You can see I have him there at 16.2% ownership. So for me to get 35 or 40% exposure really isn't all too much to ask for. That's exactly what I'm doing. Joe Mixon up here, he's in that great over-under game against the Chargers. A core play for that reason. Same thing up here with Eckler. As of right now, he's not in my player pool, but if I can try and squeeze him in, at least I'm going to try and go ahead and do so. He's a little bit expensive. In my first build or two, he wasn't in my lineups, but I'm sure if I try to force him into some of these LA stacks, I can get him in that way. He's somebody that I do want exposure to because Austin Eckler could put up a massive performance in that type of an offensive shootout. Let's move on to the mid-tier here. James Robinson, he's questionable. He should be good to go, though. I'm just not making him our priority here. I expect this Rams team to win pretty handedly. Josh Jacobs is questionable. He should play, though. The matchup against Washington is actually pretty ideal. So with that questionable tag, might come in with lower ownership than he should, which makes him somebody I'm at least keeping my eye on. James Conner here at $5,900 is sneakily becoming one of my favorite plays on the slate. He's my highest owned player on this slate as of right now. Their weather up in Chicago does not look great. So as a result, probably going to be leaning on the running tack a little bit more than usual. And James Conner has been an absolute stud for them, with Chase Edmonds out of the lineup. Gaskin, he's always an okay play. I'm not really excited to go and play him or anything like that, but he at the very least projects well against a pretty soft defense. David Montgomery, in terms of points per dollar type production, is one of the best plays on the slate. Just unfortunately, I don't see them winning this game against the Cardinals. So he might end up getting you the 17 to 20 fantasy points that you're looking for, but I'm not sure if he breaks the slate. So he's somebody that I have in my pool, but I'm not getting 30, 40% ownership like I am with somebody like a James Conner. The one piece of chalk that I am going to be eating here is going to be Jamal Williams. I really like the situation against this Vikings team. They lit up a ton of yardage. They lit up a ton of production to opposing teams. Jamal Williams is also extremely efficient. I've been lobbying for this guy to start somewhere for years and years and years now when he was backing up Aaron Jones and putting up better yards per carry numbers, looked better as a blocker, everything like that. This guy truly is one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL. So for him to be getting 20, maybe even 25 touches today makes him an excellent play and somebody that I'll definitely be investing in. Miles Sanders has burned me so much. I don't know what it is. Maybe I just remember the times he burned me a little bit more. But I'm going back to him. It's a great matchup against the Jets. We said the same thing last week and he shit the bed. But again, the metrics point to him having a very good game, and I'm one to trust the numbers. It's gone me very far in my DFS career to this point, and I'm not going to deviate from that strategy. Let's talk about these. I don't even really want to talk about these guys at the bottom of the board. You're talking about like second stringers, people that aren't getting the bulk load of the carries. And for me, on a slate where we have so much value, even some cheap guys that are getting the bulk carries, we just don't need to prioritize these people. There's no reason to, unless you're taking a complete flyer shot in a Millie Maker GPP type of thing. They're not worth my time to even let some air out on them. I guess the one guy we will talk about is Kenyon Drake and Sony Michel here. So Sony Michel, I ran this ownership number before the whole Darrell Henderson thing. Everyone in the industry right now is kind of pumping up Sony Michel, acting like he's the starter. Unfortunately, we don't have that news though. So for me, I'm not going to be having him in my lineups. There's other people we can prioritize on the slate at lower ownership that we know we're going to be playing. So for me, that's the way that I'm going here. That's why he's not in my player pool. If he ends up starting, he's going to project for right around 16 fantasy points, which is all right. In terms of points per dollar, you're talking almost 4x value. The issue is he doesn't really have a ceiling. He hasn't been very effective as a rusher this year, and the Rams don't run the ball a whole lot. Even in positive game scripts, they tend to pass a lot more than other teams. So I'm not really sure he has the ceiling we're looking for anyways. Kenyon Drake is somebody I do really like here. The matchup against Washington is ideal. And if Jacobs ends up being rolled out, he's going to be a priority for me. So we'll have to see on the injury report there. But Kenyon Drake, even with Jacobs in the lineup, still projects as a relatively good play there. Let's move on to wide receiver. At wide receiver, we're definitely going to be spending up a little bit more than we are at running back. We also have a few value plays I want to mix in, so we'll go over those. Josh Reynolds is one of them. If you guys saw my value plays video, you know exactly how much I like him. But let's move into the top of the board to begin. Cooper Kupp is a play week in and week out. You will never get any complaints from me from playing Cooper Kupp, whether it's in a stack with Matthew Stafford or on his own. I definitely think he's well warranted in terms of ownership. Keenan Allen is a great option to use in your Herbert stacks, obviously, or as a run back for some of your Bengals stacks in that Chargers game. Like him a whole lot there. Terry McLaurin, he's all right. Has the ceiling there, but he's expensive. Same thing with Adam Thielen. He has the ceiling, but he's much more expensive than we're used to seeing him. They are coming in at low ownership, though. So if you're looking for a pivot play, trying to get unique up top, both of those guys would be your option there. Jamar Chase is one of my favorite plays on the slate. Played him last week. He ended up scoring a touchdown, but aside from that, didn't really do all that much. I'm just waiting for that blow-up game to come. And in this type of an over-under type of game, this is definitely the kind of scenario where it could happen. So I'm going to Jamar Chase here at $7,000. He's actually one of my highest owned wide receivers on the entire slate, period. Dante Johnson, if the Steelers are going to have any chance at competing today, it's going to be with Dante Johnson. He'll be in my player pool, but is far from a priority. I'm talking around 5-6% exposure. Mike Evans, he's the pivot play if you're looking for a Tom Brady stack. Tom Brady is going to be extremely popular. Same thing with Chris Godwin. Same thing with Rob Gronkowski. If you use that stack of those three, you're going to be duped with a ton of the field. At least on those three spots, right? You're going to have to differentiate somewhere else. Mike Evans, though, would be a quick pivot and a good way to just make your lineup unique right there. Not many people are going to him because he's more expensive than a Chris Godwin. And quite frankly, per the metrics, is going to project lower. This right here, 11.5, there's no way that's correct. I'll go ahead and check on that afterwards. Algorithm must have done something wrong there. I believe I had him earlier in the week closer to like a 17-point projection. So maybe it's 17.5. We'll have to go ahead and see what happened there. But Mike Edmonds, Mike Evans either way. At that type of a number, going to be a good pivot play and somebody that will be playing. And there's no denying his ceiling. He's somebody who goes out there routinely scoring 2 touchdowns over 200 yards. He does it once or twice every single year. And you want to be there in DFS for those type of performances. Tyler Lockett, can't go wrong going to him. I think he's at a good price tag right there. He's in a high over-under game against this 49ers team. And when Russell Wilson turns it around, and I don't say if, I say when, because he's going to over these next few weeks, you want to be there with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. You're going to see a massive gain from both of them here at some point. So up here, 2.8% ownership on DK, by the way, that is disrespectful. Have people forgotten how good this guy is? That's all I'm going to say there. It seems like people have short-term memory loss or something like that. Chase Claypool, he's a home run play threat. Every once in a while has a big game, just like a DK Metcalf. So at 1.5% ownership, definitely worth taking a few little sprinkles on. Hunter Renfrow, more of a core play in this range. Somebody who should see plenty of usage in this game. He's getting 8 to 10 targets per game. Putting up tons of PPR production. So if you're playing on Draftkings, a better play than maybe on some of the other sites. But in terms of the matchup, one of the better matchups against Washington over the middle. Some of the outside receivers tend to struggle a little bit against Washington, but opposing slot receivers and tight ends, that's how I'm able to filter that down, tend to have plenty of success. So I really like going to Hunter Renfrow there. Decent matchup, relatively average over-under game. So nothing really to speak of there. Mike Williams is underpriced for like the 3rd straight week. He hasn't really had that blow-up performance yet, but while he's in this mid $5,000 range, he's going to be a priority play for me. I'm right around 35% exposure there. You can see the field's kind of getting to him. They're at 9.8%. I still think that's just far too low. Brandon Ayuk was somebody I mentioned earlier in the week as a potential pivot in this range. Unfortunately, he's garnering a lot of ownership. So I thought we were going to be unique with Brandon Ayuk. Might not be quite as good of an ownership play, but still like him. He projects well, particularly with Deebo Samuel out of the lineup. Obviously, when a high-profile player like Samuel was ruled out, people immediately try to go to the 2nd, 3rd option on that team. So maybe I should have anticipated that Ayuk would be as popular as he is. I'm not sure what I was thinking there. Odell Beckham Jr. Of the LA Rams. I don't know. He's a pure just upside play. I mean, it's Odell Beckham Jr. That's all we really have to say about it. With Matthew Stafford, who's a huge upgrade for him at quarterback. If he ends up figuring out, the system, ends up trying to be a team player rather than being a diva, I think he could be a solid contributor for that team. Could take over the wide receiver 2 role there, and that is a very productive role, regardless of their talent level in the NFL. We're talking about Odell Beckham Jr., so could really take advantage of that type of a role. Van Jefferson Jr. also like going to as well. Tyler Boyd, a great buyback for some of those Chargers stacks. We can use them in your Bengals stacks as well. This range right here, I don't really like anyone, but if you ended up finding them in a lineup, I'm not going to go ahead and argue with you there. Corey Davis is back from injury. He's intriguing because he's a big play waiting to happen. Rashad Bateman, same thing against the Steelers. The Steelers have been prone to letting up some big plays as well, so you could go ahead and see that there. Laviska Shenault Jr., also a big play waiting to happen. You can see these guys aren't in my player pool, but if I was going to take a chance on anyone down low, these would be the guys, the people that have that big play upside. T.Y. Hilton, one of my favorite plays on the slate guys, coming in at just 2.1% ownership. I have 40% T.Y. Hilton. And if you take a look at his track record against the Texans in the past, I have no idea what it is. The guy just absolutely goes off. He has multiple 200-plus yard games, multiple 40-plus fantasy point performances. I remember 7-8 years ago when I was first getting into fantasy football, actually. I wasn't first getting into fantasy football. It was when I started to take it really seriously in high school. And T.Y. Hilton had like some 240-yard, 2-touchdown game against the Texans. And they showed some type of graphic where the last 4 times he played him, he was averaging 210 yards a game. He's far removed from that. We're talking 7, maybe 6, 7 years later. But at the same time, somebody who's returning from injury, he's definitely being slept on. Is the number 1 wide receiver for this team. He's more talented than Michael Pittman Jr. The numbers don't reflect that just because he hasn't been healthy to this point of the year. But ever since he returned, he's getting a higher usage percentage than somebody like a Michael Pittman Jr., which should really tell you everything you need to know about the situation. So I like going to him there. He's vastly underpriced. And again, I don't know what it is about T.Y. Hilton, but he absolutely eats this team alive. It's just something we've seen for him his entire career. I haven't brought up the numbers for it in a while. But I would imagine he might have the biggest split in terms of fantasy points of any team, of any player in the league. It may be that drastic. That's how good he is against them. Deshaun Jackson there against Washington. He's a deep play waiting to happen. I like the fit with the Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr, a strong-armed quarterback, somebody who loves moving it down the field. He's essentially replacing Henry Ruggs' production. And if we're getting Henry Ruggs at $4,200, that is an absolute steal. So definitely like going there a whole lot. We talked about that in my value plays video. Olamide Zaccheaus, he's a flyer down here, just getting more ownership than he really should be. So he's not in my player pool as of right now. I definitely think he's solid value. I just don't think you absolutely need to have him. Devontae Parker, he's coming in with a lot less ownership now than he was yesterday. He's still going to be a fade for me. He was closer to 10% yesterday. With some of the value that's opened up, he's not as much of a priority. Wouldn't surprise me if he still came in close to 7-8%. Maybe this 1.3% is a little bit low. It reacted to that news quite heavily. But either way, he's not a priority for me. We're not sure if he's going to be on a snap limit. That's definitely within the cards for somebody like a Devontae Parker. We also don't know if he's going to just be productive, right? He's coming back from injury. You have Jalen Waddle out there. You have Mike Gesicki, Albert Wilson, just Myles Gaskin, just other people you can go to on that offense. It's not really a priority for him to be getting the ball. Quez Watkins, home run play waiting to happen. If you're going to take a flyer, go ahead and do it on him. Same thing with Bryan Edwards. Josh Reynolds is also one of my favorite value plays on the slate. Ryan said Henderson news. I have no idea. I haven't been able to check yet. It's coming at like 4:30. It's a later game, so we're not going to be getting that now. We're going to be getting that later on today. So for me, I'm treating Henderson as in. Everyone else in the industry just seems to think that he's going to be out. He very well could end up being rolled out, though. But to be rolling out tons of Sony Michel without that news is reckless, in my opinion. You're taking yourself away from a lot of these value plays early on that have just as much value, in my opinion, even if Sony Michel is the starter there. So hopefully that answers your question there. I don't think you should be waiting on that. I think you should be trying to take advantage of the value that we already have, because we have plenty of it. If Henderson ends up being rolled in, you're going to be screwed with all those lineups with Michel. You're going to be hard pressed to try and find value in the late slate. If you're going to use Michel, put him at the whatever you call it, the flex spot, right? So you can try to swap to wide receiver if you need to, that kind of thing. You don't want to corner yourself into running back with Sony Michel later on. That would be a really bad situation to try and fix. Borderline impossible if you have too many guys early on. Either way, though, Josh Reynolds is somebody that I will be playing. Really like him here. He's seemingly the number one wide receiver for this team. And even though the Lions are absolute dog shit, it's not really saying much that he's the number one wide receiver there. He has a rapport with Jared Goff, played with him for 4 years out in LA, was productive last time out on Thanksgiving. I liked what I saw. So I'm going to go back to him. He's only $3,400. And only coming in at right around 12% ownership. We have some guys on the slate. We're going to get the tight end here in a second that are coming in near 30% ownership. So I'd rather take this chalk, this quote unquote chalk, that's a third of that, rather than Foster Moreau, who's an absolute enigma. Let's move on to Foster Moreau, speaking of that, because it's a decision point that we're going to have to make. And frankly, I was on him to begin the week, but now I'm completely off of Foster Moreau. But let's go ahead and bring it up here. And let's bring it up here, 28.5% ownership on Foster Moreau. That is so reckless. I cannot even begin to tell you guys. When he played for Waller earlier in the year, ended up starting, he had 6 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. So ended up putting up 18 fantasy points, which is great. But if you take away that touchdown production, he put up 11 or 12 fantasy points, which again is hitting value. I think we'd be all right with him getting right around 11 or 12 fantasy points. That's what I have him projected for right now. But do you absolutely have to have that to win a GPP? Absolutely not. We could have somebody at tight end go out here for 18 to 25 fantasy points. Somebody like a Mark Andrews. The guy I like the most to go out and do that is somebody like a George Kittle. In fact, he's my highest owned tight end on the slate. I just don't think that he's worth 30% ownership. I mean, in the NFL with so many games, so many players to choose from, it's rare we get someone over 20% ownership. Typically it's at running back. It's with one of these value type players. For Foster Moreau, a completely unheralded player, to be at this type of ownership is just, again, quite frankly, reckless. I do not understand it. Touts across the industry are talking about him like he's a free square or something like that. The fact of the matter is, This is more of a blocking player. He's not really a receiving tight end. They use him on 2 tight end sets from time to time with Darren Waller, typically only in the red zone. And again, we have a 1-game sample size of him starting without Waller, which looks really good. But we can also take a look at all the snaps he's played this year, and he's not that efficient when he's on the field. So I think he's being drastically overhyped here. He could very well go out there and score you 3 or 4 fantasy points today, and that's all. And it wouldn't surprise me at all. It also wouldn't surprise me if he went out there and scored 16 fantasy points with a touchdown. And again, do you absolutely have to have that to win GPP today? I think that is far from the case. So for me, Foster Moreau, he was a yes for me early on in the week. As of my last build, was a full-on fade. I excluded him from my pool. I'd much rather go to some of the other value that we have here on the slate. Ryan says, eating the chalk with multipliers, agree with GPP fade. I guess I understand it, but at the same time, man, he has a low ceiling. And if you're in tiers, I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? You don't really need to worry about chalk in tiers. Or multipliers, right? And sorry, I don't know why I thought you said tiers. Sorry about that. You said multipliers. Yeah, when you're in cash, you don't have to worry about ownership, right? In fact, you actually want to play the high zone players. The way it works in cash is when you're playing the chalk, the quote unquote chalk, and you're exposing yourself to the same players as the rest of the field, you're narrowing down what you actually need to have go well for you to win, right? So if you have 6 players that are chalk, like everyone takes those 6 players, and you only have 3 positions left to worry about, it's a 3v3, right? You just got to get those 3 positions right to end up winning that contest. So I completely agree with you there. In cash, I don't see a reason to fade him. It lets you spend up for another stud option. So it's also helpful in that way as well. But a couple other guys I like going to. Mark Andrews, he is a great matchup against Devin Bush. Devin Bush is the worst Pittsburgh Steeler. He was the worst decision that franchise has ever made in trading up for a player. Mark Andrews is going to eat him alive today. I'm expecting 20 plus fantasy points from Mark Andrews. George Kittle, same kind of thing, high over under game, no Deebo Samuel. He's going to be an absolute usage monster. Love going there at $5,900. Kyle Pitts, if you need a run back for some of your Buccaneer snacks, is an excellent option. Rob Gronkowski is a little bit chalky, but I love using him in some of my Tom Brady stacks. He's somebody who was very effective towards the beginning of the year, very effective last week as chalk. I don't really see a reason to fade him, right? He's chalk, but he's good chalk. Zach Ertz being much lower owned than he should be, even if that's a tough weather matchup up there in Chicago, shouldn't be coming in at 1.5% ownership. So I'll probably get 3 or 4 shares there just to get a little bit over the field. Dallas Goedert is somebody I love talking about here on the channel. He's a regular for me, will be in my player pool once again. Same thing with Pat Freiermuth. Tyler Higbee is my highest exposed option at tight end. So a lot of that really comes down to the fact I like Matthew Stafford here. Also that he's a huge red zone threat. He's one of the highest usage rates of any tight end in the NFL once it gets down into the red zone. And he's underpriced there. He's at $3,800. So this is a great example of somebody you could pivot to off of a Foster Moreau, particularly in a GPP. He's $1,100 more, which is a little bit higher. You know, that is going to significantly change your roster construction, but somebody that I have projected for a much higher floor, but also has a much, much higher ceiling. You have 25 to 30 point ceiling with somebody like a Tyler Higbee, as opposed to maybe an 18 point ceiling, what we saw last time out with Foster Moreau. Let's move a little bit further down the board. These 2 really cheap tight ends in that Chargers-Bengals game are some of my favorite options on the entire slate at $3,100 and $3,000. Great as buybacks or stacking options. We already touched on Foster Moreau. And that's it. That's it for tight end. Let's finish up with the defenses real quick. And not really much to speak of here at defense, but we'll touch on it. A few guys that I'm planting my flag in and scatter-shotting the rest of the spots per usual. So at the top of the board, this Rams defense is being a little bit underlooked in my opinion. They have a very solid secondary. Trevor Lawrence has been extremely turnover prone. So even at $4,000, I don't love paying for some of the more expensive defenses on any slate, but I think they're an intriguing option. Same thing with the Colts. I mean, the Texans are just absolute crap. This Eagles-Jets game is getting a ton of attention, particularly on the defensive side of things. Zach Wilson looks like Mark Sanchez. He's really started to look like Mark Sanchez. Maybe you want to target that defense. I completely understand it. I'll have them in my player pool. Let's go to the bottom of the board, though. You know, this middle tier range, I don't really love any of the matchups. They're a little bit more expensive than they should be. So I'm trying to focus a lot of my exposure on either one of these 3 premium options, which we've spoken about them. I think the matchups are good, or these just really cheap options where we hope there's a defensive touchdown. We hope there's just a lot more turnovers in the game that we expect. One prime option for that could be the Giants. Tua has been a turnover machine. They've been effective on offense this year. Definitely a lot of improvement from what we saw there in 2020. But if they revert to that type of form, would be a great matchup. So perhaps that's in the cards there. I'm not a big Tua fan long term. I don't think that he's as good as people expect him to be, or at least as they think that he is. Bears defense against the Cardinals. Again, that's supposed to be a bad weather matchup. So that always makes it intriguing in terms of the defensive side of things. Darren Carr has also been prone to having some bad games this year. I've seen it once or twice before. Happened against the Giants. So the football team could be an interesting matchup there. The Texans against Indy is a pure flyer play. They have some talent there on that Texans defensive side of things. Would really come down to a defensive touchdown, though. They're really cheap, though. They're coming at 1% ownership. So if you take 2 or 3 shares in a pool of 150, I think that's well warranted. And finally, the Lions defense. This is more of a gut kind of feel here. I think this game's a lot closer than people expect it to be. This Lions team has had quite a few losses by just a single score. They obviously had the tie with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think they get as much credit for their talent level as they really should. So as a result, if this game ends up being a little bit closer, maybe the reason why is the Lions end up returning a touchdown or something like that. They're $2,300, so you're getting a ton of salary savings there. And they're definitely somebody I'll be taking a shot down low. But yeah, that's all we've got here for the live stream, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys got some information for building your lineups that you can take home, implement everything like that. Make sure to make sure to like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. We're going to have plenty of content for next week for week 14, whether it's for Showdown, the main slate, live stream at the same time, of course. So look forward to that. I got to get back to building some of these lineups. I have 450 lineups to build for today. So good luck out there, guys, and let's get this cash today.